Our next speaker is from the UK, Charlotte Marshall, who asked me not to say a lot about her, but she's been the director of Sabeel-Kairos UK for more than 10 years. Welcome, Charlotte.
Good afternoon, everybody. I bring you these reflections as an activist, as a person who's been in solidarity with the Palestinian people for nearly 20 years. I don't stand here as a theologian, and I think it's important to make that clear right now. Bit of both. I'm going to spend the first few minutes just reflecting, because actually what this document offers us is a chance to look critically at how we as a solidarity movement have either succeeded or failed in our mission. And my reflections have taken me on a bit of a journey the last few days, and in fact, these thoughts were not finalized until I had heard the last four speakers and indeed my colleagues here today. Yes, we have had successes in 16 years in the UK. I can think of times of divestment, instances where the church has called out apartheid more recently, although it did take us 10 years to get to that language. But in many ways, we have failed. And I take that as both a personal failure, but more than that, as a failure as the UK state. And the one thing I want to mention about how I see this failure, what highlighted to me this failure. About 2 weeks after October the 7th, we had the first of what would become a regular March for Justice for Palestine in London. Over 800,000 people took to the streets. And I would be lying if I said to you that the churches were amongst those people. At the front of that march were leaders from the Muslim community, the Jewish community, the secular community, young people, old people. Was there a single bishop or a head of church in the UK amongst them? No. And that is why I say we have failed, because we have failed to convict and convince the church that they have a moral obligation and a duty to be at that front of that march for justice. And since that march, there have been marches every week, every other week throughout that time, and we have not seen a single church leader at those marches. Where did we succeed? We succeeded in mobilizing the grassroots. We succeeded in seeing a presence on those marches of ordinary church people, lay and clergy, who were desperate to respond to what they were seeing as a live-streamed genocide. What did we compromise on in the last 16 years? In order to try and increase our ability to influence church leaders, we compromised our language. In order to work with others, our message became watered down. Their message didn't become elevated. Our message became watered down. How did we fail in BDS? We failed because we allow them to apply it selectively. We failed because we allow them to divest quietly, behind the scenes, not actually acknowledging that divestment is an act of solidarity as much as a financial decision. How did we also fail? We failed because we allow them to delay important, self-critical discussion about what the church thinks theologically about what is happening in this land. I give you an example of that from the Church of England, and I'm sorry if I'm about to offend anybody, but I'm going to name this. We have had a diocesan synod motion on the queue, a queue for the agenda at General Synod of the Church of England for 4 years now. This was due to be debated in July last year, at a moment where genocide is occurring to the Palestinian people. This motion calls on the Church of England to challenge the theological justification for the oppression of the Palestinian people. It calls on them to read and engage with the Kairos Palestine documents, and it calls on them to divest any of their funds that are complicit in sustaining the occupation. This diocesan synod motion, having waited 4 years, was delayed. The reason given, too much other legislative business. This is what Father Fadi and I wrote together to the Church of England. The omission of the Carlisle Diocesan Synod motion at a time when the Palestinian people are enduring an ongoing genocide represents a profound moral and spiritual failure. If this is not a Kairos moment for the church, particularly for the Church of England, then when is the right time? There is a time for truth-telling, repentance, transformation, and decisive action. So what do we change and what do we learn from this experience in the last 16 years? To start with, we reevaluate who do we work with, who do we partner with, who do we turn out on the streets with? Not just a reevaluation of our partnerships with churches, but with organizations who are unwilling to use this language that we are being called to use upon in truth-telling. We call for BDS, but we call with no compromise. Why is the language of boycott so abhorrent to our churches? They will not use the word boycott or call for boycotts, despite what is going on here. We no longer have to compromise in what we say. We are at this urgent moment because the last 16 years has been a compromise about the language we use and our calls for action. To move on to more positive things, this document represents new opportunities for us, and they excite me. It talks about, really to me, at the heart of who we are as a movement. We return to our grassroots. If we no longer can engage with the elites and with the church leaders, we build a movement from the ground up. If 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 10,000 people within a church are marching, calling for justice, calling for BDS, using the language of settler colonialism, apartheid, and genocide, the hierarchy of the church will have no choice but to listen. Our strength and our power is in that grassroots. We take seriously to not only involve and engage young people, but to use and utilize their ideas and their strengths. In the last 24 months, we have seen campus protests, divestment initiatives, strikes, popular boycotts, all led by our young people in the UK. No longer do we need to give a nod to this and a well done. We need to embrace them, bring them into our movement, be guided by them, and allow our campaigning models to be changed and transformed by them. And finally, this document offers us a new opportunity to extend Kairos beyond the church. I read this document as a Christian, and I think to myself, how would my non-Christian friends find this? I think they would find so much that they recognize themselves in here. A shared humanity, a shared social conscience, a desire to see a different world and a different world order. So let's work in new coalitions, progressive voices across all churches, across all religions, and in the secular world. Embrace that diversity and use it for our strength. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte, for your honesty of failures and successes.